Welcome back to the season of encounters, folks. On this exciting episode, Rev Jeff takes us to Humboldt County. No, not California, but Iowa. Now does the hairy man really live behind the door? Find out tonight, along with a new Quasi-Theory from Dean Cooper, and a new camping tips for stupids from our very own Jeven Moore. It is lining up to be an epic episode tonight. All that and more on the Squatchers Lounge Podcast. And now, here's your host, Rev Jeff Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Announcer Man. Cole Wilmus is the man behind the voice. That's right. People are mistaking him for my old host Batdorf, and that's just not the case. You don't remember what Batdorf sound like. There's lots of files out there to remind yourself. And I am your host, Reverend Jeff Kelly, podcast host to Nessie, and he hit me up for about $350. Speaking of 350, a lot of you people out there have been asking me, do I have a Patreon account? Am I selling t-shirts? None of that's actually going on. However, if you're here during the live show, there is what's called the super chat. You want to send the Reverend a donation? Click the super chat button and figure it out. Also on the about page, that's right, it's linked to the PayPal account. If you'd like to make a donation, but I'm not starting a Patreon account where everybody can make me one of their bills every month. That's not happening. That just sounds like a douchebag thing to do. So anyhow, we are going to think about some t-shirts, maybe some coffee mugs, but God, I've always wanted to stay away from that because I'm afraid I'll order 1,000 of them and end up with, 980 of them in my. Anyhow, we're here to talk about Bigfoot, and this week we are talking about Iowa. Bigfoot in the corn? Yeah, very possibly Bigfoot in the corn. As usual, though, we start out with a little bit of news, and tonight we've got exactly that, just a little bit of news. So let's take a look at it. Apparently, we're going to give old ramblings of a schizophrenic Brit. Richard Allen's going to get a little bit of promo here for a minute. Did Tim Fasano commit a faux pas once again? Is he a hoaxer? Are they going to hoax? Have they hoaxed before? Well, indeed, they have hoaxed before. Tim Fasano even admitted to the hoax, to the hog hoax right here on my channel. If you just search for Tim or Fasano in the search box over there, it'll actually kick you over to the, in his own words. I didn't even have to beat it out of him. He volunteered that he hoaxed it. Well, apparently he posted some videos on his website and then made them private. But you would think, and this, of course, Tim's actual website, you would think that Tim would be bright enough to actually go on his website and remove the link to said video, but apparently not. If you click on said video, it just says that it's available. Well, Tim, I don't know really what you got got planned going on out there, but we've always got our eyeball on you. And thanks to Richard for keeping me abreast of that situation. All right. Roddy Bottom's Sasquatch opera is inspired by monsters, hillbillies, and New York. Why should I care? Dude, because this is Faith No More's keyboard player, and he brings his debut opera to the fringe. What really speaks to me in stories is a monster, a character with really intense machismo, who has a hidden sense of vulnerability and pathos. Roddy Bottom is discussing Sasquatch, the opera, his musical about his family's encounter with the mystical beast. I loved The Elephant Man when I was younger, and things like King Kong and Frankenstein always spoke really clearly to me. So you can check out this article on the list at festival.list.co.uk or ask me for the link. I'll be glad to give it to you, but it's floating around. This was super sad, and I hope it loads. So we're gonna try and stop and load it and come back to it. Well, there it was, you bastard. Of course it was. Child's tooth is the fourth fossil clue discovered to the mysterious Denisovians. That's right. We talk about ancient, archaic leftover type of humans that may still be around the world. The Denisovians very well could be those mystery almas living in, the Russian Urals and places like that. Well, the new DNA's got everybody scouring the caves, buddy. I mean, they are just scouring caves or anything they can. The new eDNA, now they don't even have to find teeth, and they can find human DNA in those caves and tell you where they came from. But apparently, hard fossils are still the thing they're out looking for. 3 becomes 4. The extraordinary sparse fossil record of the Denisovians, an ancient form of human, has gained one more specimen, a tiny worn tooth belonging to a young girl. And I was actually having a conversation with Cole just the other day about this. Why do we have all these specimens for humans? Why do we have all these representations along the human evolutionary path? Is simply because we lived in caves. Why don't we have them for Sasquatch? Because we lived in caves. They didn't. See, that's the main difference in things, is things that live out into the wild, there isn't a whole lot of fossil record for them. Things that lived in protected caves, well, that protects their evidence of their being there in the first place. So that's exactly why we find many species of humans along the line of the cave dwellers, but we're not finding a lot of species for things that exist between humans and chimpanzee, because most likely there are lots. Okay, let's go back and check this one out, because I think it finally loaded. Teen bit in the head by a bear wakes up to crunching sounds. Yeah, scary, scary stuff. A teen staffer at a Colorado camp fought off a bear after waking up Sunday to find the animal biting his head and trying to drag him away. Yes, he was going to be food. The 19-year-old woke up around 4 a.m. to a crunching sound with his head inside the mouth of a bear, which was trying to pull him out of his sleeping bag as he slept outside at Glacier View Ranch, 48 miles northwest of Denver, Colorado. Parks and Wildlife spokesman Jennifer Churchill said the teen punched and hit, and other staffers who were sleeping nearby yelled and swatted at the bear, which eventually left and let the man live. Amazing kind of stuff. This is why keep bear spray with you even while you sleep, especially if you're sleeping outside. Yeah, why people don't protect themselves in the wild, I will never really understand, but they do it every single year. Kind of strange. Okay, moving right along. Archaeologists discover a new way to tell if humans were around. This is exactly what I was talking about. If so far the presence of bones was an indicator that humans were around a particular moment in the past, archaeologists have found another way of deciding that. How is that possible? Paleolithic archaeologists find a site with plenty of man-made tools. Sometimes they're not able to find bones and decide who were responsible for making them. The Neanderthals, the Homo sapiens, the Denisovians. A new method in which bones are not needed has been discovered in the study of DNA in the soil. A researcher at Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, Vivian Sloan, that's right, go you, go girl, together with a team of researchers, are the ones who coordinated the research study in which they extracted genetic material from sediment samples from 4 caves in Europe. This led to their impressive discovery in which it was concluded the bones are no longer needed. And they're trying to apply this to Sasquatch, which is fine. I kind of understand that, but this machine isn't going to be able to spit out magic Sasquatch DNA. It's just going to spit out a bunch of garbled crap it doesn't understand. Right now, it's only reading like known genomes. And if they get an unknown genome in there inside of the caves, well, most likely it's going to be on the human past somewhere that we haven't found before. So they'll study it a little deeper. But magic Sasquatch DNA doesn't exist unless you believe Dr. Ketchum, who tells you it's half human and half unknown ape that only happened once, but now there's thousands of Bigfoots. I haven't quite figured out how that all works. Not sure how it's going to translate to the Sasquatch world, but definitely to known fossilizations and evolutionary paths. It's going to fill in giant holes that exist out there. We're going to find out that there's not 4 or 5 types of humans that interbred and ended up as Homo sapiens in the end, that there's probably a dozen or so that span that million of years period where things stood up and walked out of Africa, not out of Erica. I have no idea who Erica is. Sorry, Erica, if you're out there, I don't mean to imply that the human species walked out of you. Okay. U.S. Special Forces hunted a family of dangerous Bigfoot. Was it a cover-up? We killed 7 of them. Yeah, disclosed TV. This thing's going around. This is definitely a government cover-up on some subject of Bigfoot. In the early 90s, I was with a team in the Navy. We were sanctioned by an alpha government agency to put up stop to several aggressive Sasquatch in the high country of western North Carolina. We thought it was a joke at the mission briefing, but it was no joke. My partner in our team of 12 was my swim buddy. He was Native American. Oh, great. That makes it even better. This man wasn't scared of anything, except for Hopis, because they're freaking witches. Before we ordered to go out during the briefing, all these agents are showing us slides of what these creatures did to people, adults and children alike, as well as the damage done to vehicles and homes. Anyway, my buddy turned white with fear, and he told me, this is bad, really bad. So we picked up the newspaper, and we found this group. Apparently, they had been disavowed by the government, but they're still out there. And if you need help and you can find them, you can hire the A Sasquatch team. I don't know. I have no clue. Sounds like a book, probably a good book, maybe even a movie script in there somewhere. But as far as a real event that happened, kind of doubt it. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it for this week. Kind of doubt it. I appreciate everything that's going on out there. I really do. But for right now, with all these fake news sites that are going on and around, I ain't believing shit. Just straight up. I ain't believing that. You better come up with like pieces of a Sasquatch body before I can believe it. With all this fake crap going around right now, ain't nobody got time for that. Speaking of ain't got no time for that, it's now time for a Dean Cooper Quasi-Theory of the week. That's exactly what's happening now. Karma. And now, Quasi-Theories from a quasi-scientist with your host, Dean Cooper.
Karma. Karma, karma, karma. Damn near everybody uses the word these days. Karma credit, karma, karma gold, karma GoPro, karma car. Those last 4 are registered brand names. Damn near everybody who says it thinks they know what it means. They think it means you do good things and good things happen to you. Ditto for doing bad things, and they're correct, sort of. Karma is a Sanskrit word that more accurately means for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Yup, Newton's good old third law of motion, as illustrated by those desk toys with the 2 balls suspended on a rod, where you swing one, it hits the other, which then swings up and then back and whacks the one you swung, which then, well, you've all seen what that toy does. Newton's third law leaves out an important aspect of the concept of karma, though. Newtonian physics has everything happening in empty space. In Hindu metaphysics, there is no empty space. So karma can't be looked at as simply as the third law views things, like things bumping back and forth for all eternity. The Hindu universe is multi-layered, much like modern quantum physics. There are dimensions within dimensions, with all those dimensions occurring in a substrate, a conscious substrate, technically called the Brahman. You can think of it as sort of a universal mind, sort of, or an ocean of all consciousness. All apparently separate individual things are more like little wavelets, wavelets that are created by the internal self-movement of that ocean. All these wavelets are necessarily conscious, some more, some less, since they are all part of that ocean of consciousness. I hope none of you dropped acid or did some shrooms. This has definitely gone cosmic, as the old hippies would say, like me. Okay, so back to karma. The word karma comes from the Sanskrit word kri, which comes from a hypothesized Proto-Indo-European word krer, spelled K-W-E-R. Krer means to make or form. Our word create comes from the same root word. Karma means an action, whether word or deed, that you created. Where all of us, from the smallest subatomic particle to you and me, to this universe we live in, and beyond that to all the other possible universes. We are all in that one ocean of consciousness. So each and every little wave of karma we create eventually will, in this life or another, come back around and give us a little kiss or slap us upside the head with that good old third law of Newton. You may read the text of this on my blog at bydeen.com. That's BHDIN.com.
Well, look at that, Mr. Dean Cooper, getting all quasi-theory on us. As a matter of fact, Dean, I think you left one karma out. Isn't that karma, chameleon? Aha, see what I did there? That's right, everybody. Now, it's that time again once of the week where we get our camping tips on with Camping Tips for Stupids. So thank you, Mr. Jeven Moore, for another installment.
Camping Tips for Stupids. Tip number 43. This is your smartphone. This is an electric fence. These are your bestest friends. This is a coffee pot. And this is Bigfoot's face watching you from the bushes. Be careful where you go to take a leak in the middle of the night out there, people. This has been Camping Tips for Stupids. Remember to spay and neuter your idiot population.
Well, there you have it, people. Spay and neuter your idiot populations. Hey, it's time to give those shout outs out there in magic internet lands. If you're out there watching live, I'm talking to you peoples. As a matter of fact, I got contacted by somebody just earlier today. Aaron McCabe was hanging out and watching live and wanted to make it be known that he appreciates and likes the show, and we appreciate and like you out there because I'm here, you're there, makes this whole thing fantastically awesome. So let's see who's hanging out in the live hangout tonight. Asderlane Drake, how you doing, man? Glad you're out there, sir. Sam Squanch Rivera's in the house. Your Hobo Man 5, he's in it. Wyatt Ola, how you doing? Danny from Texas, how you doing there, champ? Kurt Harris. Brown Dwarf's hanging out tonight as well. Our quasi-theorist, of course, Mr. Dean Cooper. I see there's other people out there tonight as well. I see Oreo Cream Rocks. Yes, it does. Rodney Wilson, how you doing, man? So glad you're hanging out, man. I have no idea what y'all are talking about. Let's see here. Natalie Smith, hopefully your phone doesn't blow up tonight while she's listening. Jeremy Harrison, how you doing there, sir? California Picking, hey Drew, how you doing, man? Squatch Box and her boy Christopher, even though he says I don't get any sweet rolls, I'll say hi to him anyhow. Let's see here. There's more people in the house than this. I know there is. Keith Harden, how you doing? That's right. I was making fun of the Hopis because they're all witches. Don't you know that? Let's see here. I heard that. Somebody keeps saying, I heard that somewhere that Hopis were witches, but apparently that must be the case. William Morris, how you doing, sir? Timothy McCune, he's hiding out there. My drunken Irish dad, Ryan McGinty, he's floating around out there. Jarrett Moleman, wow, that's an interesting way to spell mole. Moly. I'm sorry. Rod Dupree, he's always in the place to be. Cole Wilmus, he's floating around out there. Ruth Walton, did you finally make it in here? That's amazing that you're there on time. Pretty sure I said something about William Morris, but if I didn't, I did now. And that is there. And Starshine is always playing with her tool. I mean, just I don't know where else to go with that. If you haven't said hi to me here in the chat box, come by, catch us live at 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights, Pacific time. Yes, specifically at Pacific time. There is Lance Windsor. See, I almost didn't get your name in there because I didn't see it just now. Wow, Rodney, you were way behind on the David dude stuff. He hasn't been here all year, man. You're 7 months late. He retired from podcasting. So that's the rules, and that's the way it goes. Thanks for hanging out in the live Squatchers Hangout live with us tonight. You know what we're talking about tonight? We are talking about Iowa. That's right. I said Iowa. Why are we going to Iowa, Rev? Well, because we got people that live in Iowa, and apparently there are Sasquatches in Iowa as well. Humboldt County, Iowa, as a matter of fact. And it's not new stuff. This is stuff that's been around for quite some time. So let's get the old map janked up here real quick, and we'll start talking about some of this Iowa stuff. There's actually old news clippings and all kind of good stuff that goes along with Iowa. Now, you would think that the Sasquatches would be in a little bit different location than this, but apparently that is not the case, because Humboldt County is in a strange location to have the most Bigfoot encounters of anywhere in Iowa. You know, it's right next to Pocahontas and Goldfield. Those are the cities that are right in the middle of all of this. So let's give you an eyeball at what we're looking at tonight, right here in Iowa. I pushed that button, but it didn't give it to me. There it is. All right. It's all just a little slow tonight, people, but there you go. Right there. That is Humboldt County, Iowa. And it has the largest amount of Bigfoot sightings out of any of them. I'm just trying to kick it over to the satellite, and we'll let that load for you here. We'll take a look. 1978, August 2nd, newspaper clipping from the Des Moines Register says, ape-like creature reportedly seen. Now, this is like a whole set of events that kind of starts, goes clear up until December. It's really kind of strange, the whole thing. But the AP, right all the way out to the Associated Press, sightings of an ape-like creature have been causing some concern in the small town of Ostman. Humboldt County Sheriff Marvin Anderson said his department has been investigating the sightings, which have been reported by the youngsters and adults during the last several days. Anderson said witnesses described the creature as about 5 feet tall, hairy, standing on 2 legs, and having a wide forehead. The first sighting was last Thursday night, and the latest was Monday, when an adult said the creature was heading north of Ostman into a cornfield. The sheriff said one reason for concern is that several pets. Wow, there we go. Again, it's that time of year. Sorry, folks. That adult said the creature was heading off north Ostman into a cornfield. The sheriff said one reason to be concerned is that several pets in the area have been mangled to death in recent days. Anderson said that he has contacted neighboring county authorities to see if they have any reports of a missing monkey or ape. He said he hasn't ruled out pranksters, but he thinks that this animal may actually be a bear. Weren't no bear. Hey, Ostman's population is 93 people, folks. So then we move ahead here just a little bit to August the 6th. And if we take a look at that map, we're in cornfield heaven. That's just, you're right there in the middle of waterways. You are, for the most part, you can really move amongst any of this stuff and really not be seen that often, because really, how often are these farmers out on every piece of their located farmland? Just very strange to think that Bigfoot would be here, but we're gonna get a little closer down the road here and find out for sure what else they're saying about it. Let's see here. August the 6th article tells us Ostman, Iowa, typical August evening when the sky is ablaze and the stars, the breeze is warm and slight. You can stand near the pop machine on Main Street and hear traffic whiz by on a distant highway. Yada, 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 yada. One resident Appalled by the intrusion, the visitors have trampled their trucks, cars, and motorcycles have roared into town, some occupants brandishing flashlights and a few guns. One resident appalled by the intrusion called the Humboldt County Sheriff Marvin Anderson to complain that she couldn't safely cross the street in front of her home. Something foul smelling. The source of the commotion is stories of a creature lurking at Ostman, a hairy, foul-smelling 5-foot ape-like monster that growls and grunts and lives in the shadows. On at least 3 separate occasions in the last 1 to 2 weeks, the creature reportedly has been seen. The witnesses include 2 women and 6 children. Mrs. Jan Hankins, who said she briefly saw the creature twice, said, "It isn't anything like I've seen before. People like this say I'm just crazy, but I know what I saw." Miss Hawkins says she believes 2 of her daughters saw the monster. She describes the girls as white with fright. Haha, see you next Thursday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Move up here to September 24th in 78. And let's see here. This gives us a little more detail. A fortnight ago, Anna Drodrell froze with fear as she looked up from a load of dishes into the burning red eyes of a big-nosed, black-faced, hairy-headed staring at her through her window at a few feet away. Terror tied her tongue. Her brother, who earlier that evening thought he had seen a large and hairy arm reach out from behind the cattle shed, sat at the table with rifle ready, but he knew nothing of the kitchen scene beyond his view. Seconds passed, slowly agonizing. The creature's eyes bored in on Drodrell. Frightened as she had never been before, she blinked, but could not look away. After 3 minutes, Anna Drodrell screamed. The creature, whatever it is, fled into the darkness outside of her farmhouse, 3 miles northwest of here. "It was the first time in my life I couldn't move," Drodrell said later. That night may have been Bigfoot. The beast, rumored since July to be responsible for the eerie night screams, broken fences, stampeded cattle, chewed up cats, mangled rabbits, and the death of a dog whose neck had been broken while it's chained near the home of its master. It, named or nameless, male or female, or something biological unknown, has been seen since. I mean, this is wow. This is really hard to old-timey radio guy. All right. Moved ahead to October of 78. Another Bigfoot sighting has been reported in Humboldt County. Mark Thompson, the teenage son of Mr. and Mrs. Leroy Thompson of rural Hardy, told authorities that he saw a creature resembling Bigfoot Thursday evening in a soybean field on a farm his family is working near Hardy. Mrs. Thompson said her son was sitting in a pickup truck in a lane on the edge of the field when he saw the large ape-like creature looking at him. She said Mark drove closer to the creature for a better look. He said it was about 7 feet tall and covered with brownish black hair. The creature moved away when Mark honked his horn and flashed the pickup's light. An independent observer who visited the bean field Saturday said he found footprints that led into a marshy area and disappeared in tall weeds. He said the prints were 14 inches long, 2 inches deep. They definitely were not made by any farm animal, he said. Wow. And to wrap up the news articles of Humboldt County, let's see here. And there's a couple of encounters that actually go right along with these, which is actually kind of nice. During the past 3 months, this is December 12th, 78. During the past 3 months, Iowans have heard a lot about Bigfoot. The legendary ape-like creature purported to roam the countryside at night in search of food. Some of these stories were generated by Bigfoot sightings. Some of the stories reported in July and September near the small town of Ostman, where several Humboldt County residents say they either saw Bigfoot or heard strange screams in the night. Many dismiss Bigfoot as a myth. Others who believe there is a Bigfoot, Yeti, or Sasquatch that occupies a place between man and ape argue that the creature lives only in the Northwest and could not possibly survive in the Midwest. Nevertheless, the Bigfoot phenomenon, whether fact, fiction, or hoax, is very much alive in Iowa. Since last January, Bigfoot has been reported near at least 10 Iowa communities. Deeds attributed from a pile of dead chickens found near Mitchell County town of Riceville to the dark face that peered at a woman through the kitchen window of a farm near Odison. There's even one unsubstantiated report from a Sioux City research group that a man wounded a Bigfoot with a deer rifle in 1974 near Stone State Park on the northwest edge of Sioux City, Iowa. Dun, dun, dun. It always leads down to the Bigfoot killings. All right, let's see here what we have for some official. See what they have to say about that. 1977 fall, September. So before all of that happened, Odison, Iowa now is Rossing Avenue. This happened when I was very young. I figured it had to have been reported. I was approximately 6 years old and was helping my mother cut some weeds out of the field before my father combined, and we discovered some very large footprints heading from the end of the field towards the house. We stopped my father, who was in the combine, and showed the tracks to him, which looked very human-like, but upon comparison to his foot was very large, and the stride it had taken was very large and unreproducible for my father, who was 5'11". My parents reported it to the sheriff's department, and they came and investigated the tracks. Many of the locals and others came and looked at the tracks also. All I know is that it scared me to death and had many a nightmare about it. And my father went and bought a big gun in case it came back. Bum, bum, bum. Ain't going to shoot that Sasquatch. We're going to shoot him and collect that money. There's got to be bounty money for him, right? Right back to September of 1978, Iowa Flap. Wow. Reports of a hairy beast night screams have Iowa town on edge. You people are just wanked. Okay, sorry. It was just a reproduction of the other one. 2001, a little more contemporary. Wow, do they still live there? Apparently 30 years later they do. Spring, April time. Not April 1st. Sumner Avenue Bridge is the closest road near Highway 169. Me and 5 friends were walking in the woods at night on April 2nd this year, and we saw something pretty big and real thick and furry crouching behind a bush that was in between 2 trees. Yeah, that's my kind of place to hide. He had his hands on the tree and poked up to look at us. We had a video camera with us at the time, but it does not show the creature. The reason we had the camera with us was because all the dogs in our town were going crazy the last few days, and we had heard odd noises coming from down in these woods, which was right alongside the Des Moines River. We got extremely scared at the sight of this thing, and we took off running right after we flipped the camera light on to try and get it on tape. The next morning, we went down to the same spot to try and find some evidence. We found nothing real important there except some broken twigs and whatnot. However, a little ways away, we found a large femur bone, either a cow or a human. Really? There's a lot of things between cow and human. It was much too big to be a deer and wasn't a horse. This led us to dig around, and we found 22 more bones. We also noticed a bunch of fur around it, like a rabbit or something. About a week later, we went back during the day because we were scared at night and found a deer dead with its rear bit completely off, shredded. We still have these bones and that movie. We reported it to the police, and they said to give them the movie and the bones. I was wondering if this would be the right thing to do. No, never give the government your evidence. They'll just cover it up. Boo. All right. I'm going to wrap it up. 2011, wintertime in Iowa, Humboldt County, Gorch Park, near Gorch Park Road. Fellow tells us, I like to go to Gorch Park and watch the eagles. I used to stand in the middle of the bridge for a cigarette before I went home from work. I had done this a few days in a row. That day, I got out of my truck and felt like I shouldn't be there. As I walked in the middle of the bridge, I felt very uneasy. I lit my cigarette and stared out over the river. I felt like I was being watched, and I started to get scared. It was coming from the other side of the bridge on the right-hand side. Whatever it was, I knew it was not human nor an animal, and it was a big male. Curious as to why I went there every day to the same spot and just wanted to watch what I was up to. I looked around and could not see anything. I built up my courage, looked down, and started walking slowly to the other side of the bridge. As I started walking, I heard a big crash into the river and saw a huge log floating down. And then I heard a real low huff, like something let out their air through their nose in frustration with a little noise from the throat. The log had dried vegetation on it, so I knew it wasn't, so it was laying on the forest floor. I don't know about how many pounds it was, but it was huge. The biggest guy I know wouldn't have been able to throw this thing into the river with little to no effort. I looked to where it came from and I saw nothing. I slowly turned around and walked slowly to my truck. I wanted to run, but I didn't want it to run after me if I ran. I got to my truck and took off. I was scared and shaken. I haven't been out to the bridge by myself ever since. Yeah, that's just one of those things that you hear a lot of times when people, have encounters with these things. They really kind of do get shaken to the core. I mean, some hunters stop hunting, or at least stop hunting those locations, and they end up back to square one again, maybe hunting somewhere else. And with that, that's actually going to wrap it up for this edition of the Squatchers Lounge Podcast. I do have an epic Bigfoot campfire story to share with all you guys on the way out. We are getting epically close to the camp out. We have 1 or 2 slots available, slots being, multiple people if need be. Contact me, sloungepodcast@gmail.com. But really, we're pretty closed out on that, but not done. If you're here in Sacramento and you want to go, you're already in. So just message me. But I don't want a whole bunch of people buying tickets that, and it'll get too crowded. So with that, thanks every single one of you guys for being out there tonight and watching the live Squatchers Lounge podcast. And may the Squatch be with you always. What the hell? That's no bueno. Sorry. Somehow it put the same file in the wrong place twice, but now I have it fixed. There you go. Man kidnapping lives with Bigfoot. Enjoy, and we'll see you next week. After
what the hell is that?
New Bigfoot campfire story coming next week.
I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that was a Bigfoot. Let me tell you a story. These stories are based upon true events.
Every once in a while, the classic stories pop up in the most unexpected places. This particular story gets featured in a lot in passing, but it's time he gets his very own Bigfoot campfire story. Albert was a prospector in British Columbia, and he had been on an epic trek to locate a secret gold stash. He'd been having his camp invaded by something at night. Too bad that wasn't the only thing that happened. This is his story. We pick up Albert on day 5 at his final campsite. He found an exceptionally good campsite. It was 2 good-sized cypress trees growing close together and near a rock wall with a nice spring just below the trees. I intended to make this my permanent camp. I cut lots of brush for my bed between these trees. I rigged up a pole with this rock wall to hang my pack sack on, and I arranged some flat rocks for the fireplace for cooking. I had a really classy setup, and that is when things began to happen. I am a heavy sleeper. Not much disturbs me after I go to sleep, especially on a good bed like I had now. Next morning, I noticed things had been disturbed during the night, but nothing missing I could see. Well, I roasted my grouse on a stick for breakfast. That night, I filled up the magazine of my rifle, and I had one full box of 20 shells and 6 shells in my coat pocket. That night, I laid the rifle under the edge of my sleeping bag. I thought a porcupine had visited me the night before, and porkies like leather, so I put my shoes in the bottom of my sleeping bag as well. Next morning, my pack sack had been emptied out. Someone had turned the sack upside down. It was still hanging on the pole from the shoulder straps as I had hung it up. Then I noticed 1/2 pound package of prunes was missing. Also, my pancake flour was missing, but my salt bag was not touched. Porkies always look for the salt. I decided it must be something else than porkies. I looked for tracks, but found none. I did not think it was a bear. They always tear up and make a mess of things. I kept close to the camp these days in case the visitor would come back. I climbed up on a big rock where I had a good view of the camp, but nothing showed up. I was hoping it would be a porky so I could get good porky stew. These visits had now been going on for 3 nights. This night it was cloudy and looked like it might rain. I took special notice of how everything was arranged. I closed my pack sack. I did not undress. I only took off my shoes and put them at the bottom of my sleeping bag. I drove my prospecting pick into one of the cypress trees, and I could reach it from my bed. I also put the rifle alongside me inside the sleeping bag. I fully intended to stay awake all night to find out who my visitor was, but I must have fallen asleep. Next thing I know, I was awakened by something picking me up. I was half asleep at first. I did not remember where I was. As I began to get with my wits together, I remembered I was on this prospecting trip and in my sleeping bag. My first thought was, it must be a snowslide, but there was no snow around my camp. Then it felt like I was tossed on horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking. I tried to reason with what kind of animal this could be. I tried to get out my sheath knife and cut my way out, but I was in an almost sitting position, and the knife was under me. I could not get hold of it. But the rifle was in front of me. I had a good hold of that, and no intention to let it go of it. At times, I could feel my pack sack touching me, and I could feel the cans of the sack touching my back. After what seemed like an hour, I could feel we were going up a steep hill. I could feel myself rise for every step. What was carrying me was breathing hard and sometimes gave a slight cough. Now I knew there must be one of the mountain Sasquatch giants the Indians told me about. Very uncomfortable position, unable to move. I was sitting on my feet, and one of the boots in the bottom of the bag was crossways in the hobnail sole up across my foot. It hurt me terribly, but I could not move. It was very hot inside. It was lucky for me that this fellow's hand was not big enough to close up the whole bag whenever he picked me up. There was a small opening at the top. Otherwise, I probably would have choked to death. And now he was going downhill. I could feel myself touching the ground at times. At one time, he dragged me behind him, and I could feel he was below me. Then he seemed to get on level ground and was going at a trot for a long time. By this time, I had cramps in my legs. The pain was terrible. I was wishing that he would get into his destination soon. I could not stand this type of transportation much longer. And now he was going uphill again. It did not hurt me quite so bad. I tried to estimate distance and directions. As near as I could guess, we were about 3 hours traveling. I had no idea when he started, as I was asleep when he picked me up. Finally, he stopped and let me down. Then he dropped my pack sack. I could hear the cans rattle. Then I heard chatter, some kind of talk I did not understand. The ground was slopping, so when he let go of my sleeping bag, I rolled downhill. I got my head out and got some air. I tried to straighten my legs and crawl out, but my legs were just too numb. It was still dark. I could not see what my captors looked like. I tried to manage my legs to get them some life in them and get my shoes on. I could hear now it was at least 4 of them. They were standing around me and continuously chattering. I've never heard of Sasquatch before. The Indian told me about them, but I knew I was right among them. But how to get away from them? That was another question. I got to see the outline of them now as it began to get later. Though the sky was cloudy, it looked like rain. In fact, there was a slight sprinkle. I now had some circulation in my legs, but my left foot was very sore on top where it had been resting on my hobnail boots. I got my boots out of the sleeping bag and tried to stand up. I found I was wobbly on my feet, but I had a good hold of my rifle. I asked, "What you fellows want with me?" I only got some more chatter. It was getting lighter now, and I could see them quite clearly. I could make out forms of 4 people, 2 big and 2 little ones. They were all covered with hair, no clothes on at all. I could make out the mountains around me. I looked at my watch, and it was 4:25 a.m. It was getting lighter now, and I could see these people clearly. They looked like a family. Old man, old lady, and 2 young ones, a boy and a girl. The boy and the girl seemed to be scared of me. The old lady did not seem pleased about what the old man dragged home, but the old man was waving his arms and telling them what he had on his mind. Well, they all left me then. I had my compass and my prospecting glasses on strings around my neck, the compass in my left shirt pocket, and my glass was in my right-hand pocket. Well, I tried to reason our location and where I was. I could see now that I was in a small valley or basin, about 8 or 10 acres, surrounded by high mountains. On the southeast side, there was a V-shaped opening and about 8 foot wide at the bottom, about 20 feet high at the highest point. That must have been the way I came in. But how will I get out? The old man was now sitting near this opening. Well, I moved my belongings up to the closest west wall. There were 2 small cypress trees there, and this will do for a shelter for the time being, till I find out what these people want with me and how to get away from here. I emptied out my pack sack to see what I had left in the line of food. All my canned meat and vegetables were intact, and I had 1 can of coffee. Also 3 small cans of milk, 2 packages of Rye King, hardtack, and my butter sealer half full of butter. But my prunes, my macaroni were missing. Also, my full box of shells for my rifle. I had my sheath knife, but my prospecting pick was missing, and my can of matches. Only had a safety box full, and they held only about a dozen matches. That did not worry me. I can always start a fire with a prospecting glass when the sun is shining, if I got dry enough wood. I wanted hot coffee, but I had no wood, and also nothing around here that looked like wood. I had a good look over the valley from where I was, but the boy and the girl were always watching me from behind some juniper bush. I decided there must be some water around here. The ground was leaning towards the opening of the wall. Well, there must be water at the upper end of this valley. There's a green grass and moss growing along the bottom. All my utensils were left behind. I opened my coffee tin and emptied the coffee into a dish towel and tied it up with a metal strip from the can. I took my rifle and the can and went looking for water. Right at the head under a cliff, there was a lovely spring that disappeared under the ground. Well, I got a drink and a full can of water. When I got back, the young boy was looking over my belongings. He didn't touch anything. On my way back, I noticed where these people were sleeping. It was on the east side wall of the valley, where there was a shelf in line with the mountainside overhanging a rock, looking something like a big undercut of a big tree about 10 feet deep and 30 feet wide. The floor was covered with lots of dry moss and then had some kind of blankets woven with narrow strips of cedar bark and packed with dry moss. They looked very practical and warm, with no need of washing. The first day, not much happened. I had to eat my food cold. The young fellow was coming near me and seemed curious about me. My 1 stuff box was empty, so I relied it toward him. When he saw it, he came. He sprang up quick as a cat and grabbed it. He went over to his sister and showed her. They found out how to open and close it. They spent a long time playing with it. Then he trotted over to the old man and showed him, and they had a long chatter. The next morning, I made up my mind to leave this place. If I had to shoot my way out, I could not stay much longer. I only had enough grub to last me till I got back to Toba Inlet, and I did not know the direction, but I would go downhill and I would come out near civilization someplace. I rolled up my sleeping bag, put that inside my pack sack, packed the few cans I had, swung the sack over my back, injected the shell into the barrel of my rifle, and started for the opening in the wall. Well, the old man got up, held his hands as though he would push me back. I pointed to the opening. I wanted to go out, but he stood there pushing towards me. He said something that sounded like "Soka, Soka." Well, I backed up about 60 feet. I did not want to be too close. I thought if I had to shoot my way out, a 30-30 might not have much effect on this fellow. It might make him mad. I only had 6 shells, so I decided to wait. There must be a better way than killing him in order to get out of here. Well, I went back to my campsite to figure out some other way to get out. I could make friends with one of the young fellow or the girl. Maybe they might help me if I could talk to them. Well, then I thought of a fellow who saved himself from a muddy bull by blinding him with snuff in his eyes. But how will I get near enough to this fellow to put snuff in his eyes? So I decided next time I give the young fellow my snuff box to leave a few grains of snuff in it. He might give it the old man a taste of it. The other question is, what direction will I go if I should get out? I must have been 25 miles northeast of Toba Inlet when I was kidnapped. This fellow must have traveled at least 25 more in the 3 hours he carried me. If he went west, we might be near salt water. Same thing as if he went south. Therefore, he must have gone northeast. If then keep going south over the 2 mountains, I must hit salt water someplace between Lund and Vancouver. The following day, I did not see the old lady till about 4 p.m. She came home with her arms full of grass and twigs and all kinds of spruce and hemlock, as well as some kind of nuts that grow in the ground. I've seen lots of them on Vancouver Island. Well, the young fellow went up the mountain to the east every day. He could climb better than a mountain goat. He picked some kind of grass with long, sweet roots. He gave me some one day. They tasted very sweet. I gave him another snuff box with about a teaspoon of snuff in it. He tasted it and then went to the old man. He licked it with his tongue. They had a long chat. I made a dipper from my milk can, and I made many dippers. You could use them for pots, too. You cut 2 slits near the top of any can, then cut a limb from any small tree. Cut down the back of the limb down the stem of the tree, then taper the part you want to cut from the stem. Then cut a hole in the tapered part. Slide that tapered part in a slit you made in the can, and you can have a good handle for your can. I threw one over to the young fella that was playing near my camp. He picked it up, then looked at it, then went to the old man and showed it to him. They had a longer chat. Then he came to me, pointed at the dipper at his sister. I could see that he wanted one for her, too. I had other peas and carrots, so I made one for his sister. He was standing only 8 feet away from me when I had made the dipper. I dipped it in the water and drank from it, and he was very pleased, almost smiled at me, then took a chew of stuff, smacked my lips, said, "That's good." The young fellow pointed to the old man and said something sounded like "ook." I got the idea that the old man liked snuff, and the young fellow wanted a box for the old man. I shook my head. I motioned with my hands for the old man to come over to me. I don't think the young fellow understood what I meant. He went to his sister and gave her the dipper I'd made for her. They didn't come near me again that day. I had now been there 6 days, but I was sure I was making progress. If only I could get the old man to come over to me, get him to eat a full box of snuff. Well, that would kill him for sure, and that way I can get out of here and won't be guilty of murder. The old lady was a meek thing. The young fellow was, by this time, quite friendly. The girl would not hurt anyone. Her chest was flat like a boy's, no development like young ladies. I'm sure if I could get the old man out of the way, I could easily have brought this girl out to me to civilization. But what good would that have been? I could have kept her in a cage for public display. I don't think we have any right to force our way to life on people, and I don't think they would like it. The young fellow might have been 18 years old and about 7 feet tall, might weigh about 300 pounds. His chest would have been 50 to 55 inches. His waist about 36 to 38 inches. He had wide jaws, a narrow forehead that slanted upward around the back, 4 or 5 inches higher than the forehead. The hair on their heads was about 6 inches long. The hair on the rest of the body was short and thick in places. The woman's hair on the forehead was an upward turn like some women have. They call it bangs. Among women's hairdos nowadays, the old lady could have been anything between 40 and 70 years old. She, too, was over 7 feet tall and would have been about 500 to 600 pounds. She had very wide hips and a goose-like walk. She was not built for beauty, but speed. Some of those lovable braziers and uplifters would have been great improvement on her looks and her figure. The man's 8 teeth were longer than the rest of the teeth, but not long enough to be called tusks. The old man must have been near 8 feet tall. Big barreled chest, hump on his back, powerful shoulders. His biceps on his upper arms were enormous and tapered down to his elbows. His forearms were longer than the common people have, but well proportioned. His hands were wide, and the palm as long as a board, and the hollow like scoop. His fingers were short in proportion to the rest of his hand. His fingernails were like chisels. The only place they had no hair was inside their hands and on the soles of their feet and the upper part of their nose and eyelids. I never did see their ears. They were covered with hair hanging over them. The old man, if he were to wear a collar, it would have been at least 30 inches. I have no idea what size shoes they would need. I was watching the young fellow's foot one day when he was sitting down. The soles of his feet seemed to be padded like a dog's foot. The big toe was longer than the rest and very strong. In mountain climbing, all he needs was footing for his big toe. They were very agile. To sit down, they turned their knees and came out straight down. To rise, they came straight up without help from their hands or their arms. I don't think this valley was their permanent home. I think they moved from place to place as food is available in different localities. They might eat meat, but I never saw them eat meat or do any cooking. I think this was probably a stopover place, and the plants and the sweet roots on the mountainside might have been in season this time of year. They seem to be most interested in those. The roots have a very sweet and satisfying taste. They always seem to do everything for a reason. Wasted no time on anything they did not need. When they were not looking for food, the old man and the old lady were resting, but the boy and the girl were always climbing something or some other exercise. A favorite position was to take hold of his feet and his hands, balance on his rump, then bounce forward. The idea seems to be see how far he could go without his feet or hands touching the ground. Sometimes he made 20 feet. But what do they want from me? They must understand I cannot stay here indefinitely. I will soon have to make my break for freedom. Not that I was mistreated in any way. One consolation was the old man was coming closer each day and was very interested in my snuff. Watching me when I take a pinch of snuff, he seems to think it useless to only put it inside my lips. Only one morning after I had my breakfast, both the old man and the boy came and sat only 10 feet away from me. This morning I made coffee. I saved up a bunch of dry branches I found, and I had some dry moss, and I used all the labels from the cans to start a fire. I got my coffee pot boiling, and it was strong coffee too, and the aroma from boiling coffee was what brought them over. I was sitting eating hardtack with plenty of butter on it, sipping coffee, and it sure tasted good. I was smacking my lips, pretending it was better than it really was. I set the can down on was about half full. I intended to warm it up later. Well, I pulled out a full box of stuff, took a big chew, and had 2 more boxes. Before I had time to close the box, the old man reached for it. I was afraid he would waste it. So I held on to the box, intending him to take a pinch like I had just done. Instead, he grabbed the box and emptied it in his mouth, swallowed it in one gulp. Then he licked the inside of the box clean with his tongue. Well, after a few minutes, his eyes began to roll over in his head. He was looking straight up. I could see he was sick. Then he grabbed my coffee can, and it was quite cold by this time, and he emptied that in his mouth, grounds and all. That did no good. He stuck his head between his legs and rolled forward a few times away from me. Then he began to squeak like a stuck pig. I grabbed my rifle. I said to myself, this is it. If he comes for me, I'll shoot him plumb between the eyes. But he started for the spring. He wanted water. Well, I packed my sleeping bag and my pack sack with a few cans I had left. The young fellow ran over to his mother. Then she began to squeal. I started for the opening in the wall, and I just made it. The old lady was right behind me. I fired one shot at the rock over her head. I guess she had never seen a rifle before. She turned and ran inside the wall. I injected another shell into my barrel of the rifle and started downhill, looking back over my shoulder every so often to see if they were coming. I was in a canyon, and good traveling. I made fast time. I must have made 3 miles in some world record time. I came to a turn in the canyon, and I had the sun on my left. That meant I was going south, and the canyon turned west. I decided to climb the ridge right ahead of me. I knew that I must have 2 mountain ridges between me and the salt water, and climbing this ridge, I'd have a good view of this canyon so I could see if the Sasquatch were coming after me. Well, I had a light pack and was making good time up this hill. I stopped soon after to look back where I came from, but nobody followed me. As I came over the ridge, I could see Mount Baker. Then I knew I was going the right direction. I was hungry and tired. I opened my pack sack to see what I had to eat. I decided to rest here for a while. I had a good view of the mountainside, and if the old man was coming, I had the advantage because I was up above him. To get me, he'd have to come up a steep hill, and that might not be so easy after stopping for a few 30-30 bullets. I had made up my mind that this was my last chance, and this would be a fight to the finish. I rested here for 2 hours. It was 3 p.m. when I started down the mountainside. It was nice going, not too steep, and not too much underbrush. When I got near the bottom, I shot a big blue grouse. She was sitting on a windfall, looking right at me, only 100 feet away. Shot her neck clean off. Well, I made it down the creek at the bottom of this canyon. I felt I was safe now. I made a fire between 2 big boulders and roasted the grouse. The next morning when I woke up, I was feeling terrible. My feet were sore from dirty socks. My legs were sore. My stomach was upset from the grouse that I ate the night before. I was not too sure I was going to make it up that mountain. I finally made it to the top, but it took me 6 hours to get there. It was cloudy. Visibility was only about a mile. Well, I knew I had to go downhill. After about 2 hours, I got down to the heavy timber, sat down to rest. I could hear a motor running. It was running hard at times and then stopped. I listened to this for a while and decided the sound was from a gas donkey. Someone was logging in the neighborhood. I told them I was a prospector and I was lost. I did not like to tell them I'd been kidnapped by a Sasquatch, as if I had told them, they probably would have said he's crazy too. The following day, I went down from this camp on Salmon Arm Branch of Schelt Inlet, and from there, I got on the Union boat back to Vancouver. That was my last prospecting trip, and my only experience was what is known as Sasquatches. I know that in 1924 there were 4 Sasquatches living. It might only be 2 now. The old man and the old lady might be dead long ago. Well, Albert Ostman was his name, and a few things we still refer to from his descriptions of Bigfoot, such as the Ostman's pad, the gray-looking soft tissue on the bottom of the Sasquatch foot. As far as his encounter goes, it's been retold for over 60 years for a reason. Thanks for listening. I'm Reverend Jeff, and may the Squatch be with you.